Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we explore convenient yet effective shortcuts that will help you get ahead and move forward faster by becoming a better leader. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert, and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbaugh.
Call Center Coach develops and unites the next generation of call center leaders. Through our e-learning and community, individuals gain knowledge and skills in the 6 core competencies that is the blueprint that develops high-performing call center leaders. Successful supervisors do not just happen. So go to callcentercoach.com to learn more about enrollment and download your copy of the Supervisor Success Path ebook now. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because I have somebody on the show today who's going to give us a very unique perspective on what it takes in order to be able to help an organization excel. Sean Minter was born in Richmond, Virginia, but moved a lot throughout the East Coast and Midwest. When he was younger, his father was an engineer, and so he lived in Virginia, New Jersey, Ohio, Florida, and Texas. However, once he graduated from college, he stayed in Dallas. As a kid, Sean could always be found on the sports field or tinkering on some project. Ultimately, he graduated with an engineering degree and was recruited to work in telecom networks in Dallas in the mid-90s. He obtained his master's in business at SMU while in Dallas in the executive nights and weekend program. He was primarily a technical engineer resource until AT&T recruited him to join their regulatory organization, where he spent a lot of time with public utility commissions negotiating and arbitrating the details of the opening of the local telecom markets associated with the Telecom Act of 1996. After successfully negotiating an agreement for AT&T, he and a fellow colleague at AT&T decided to start one of the first competitive local exchange carriers in Texas called Alt Communications. Alt Communications grew up and finally emerged with Birch Telecom and Value Line Long Distance in 1998. Then he decided to attack the next challenge in the telecommunications, broadband. Sean, along with a couple of advisors, decided to become the largest provider of broadband services in what was then known as the Southwestern Bell area, which consisted of Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, and Kansas. Sean raised over $200 million for this venture from VC firms, GE Capital, Lucent, and Credit Suisse. This venture was taken over by Lucent in 2001. Next, Sean decided to take on voice over IP. He and a former executive from IP Communications started Real Links in Dallas as a nationwide B2B data aggregator and VoIP service provider. This company grew and was ultimately acquired by GTT. In the meantime, Sean's former investors in IP Communications started a private equity firm and bought a BPO called PRC out of South Florida. In the mid-2000s, the company was not doing well, so they asked Sean to help out as a consultant. Ultimately, the private equity firm decided to replace the entire executive management team, and Sean took over as the COO and CIO. The company successfully restructured, and the new executive team grew the company and ultimately sold it to Alorica. With the experience he gained, Sean left Alorica and decided there was a better way to supercharge performance for frontline leaders and agents. AmplifAI was born and based on this need. AmplifAI focuses on using data to help drive consistent actions, such as coaching from frontline leaders, as well as using high performer behaviors to develop those consistently throughout the organization. Sean is focused on making sure we develop frontline leaders and employees such that they are productive and can build skills that will last them throughout their careers. Sean still lives in Dallas with his wife, Sarah, and his son, Lincoln. Sean Minter, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
I am ready.
I'm glad you're here. Now, I've given my Legion a little bit about you, but can you tell us what your current passion is so that we can get to know you even better?
Sure. I mean, my passion is to really focus on people and help them evolve to the best capability they can get to, and especially the group of people that's probably the most ignored in most companies, which is the frontline leader and the frontline employee, who gets limited resources and generates lots of churn because they're not developed to their full potential. And I really believe everybody could become a high performer in something. The goal is to figure out exactly their skill set and create a development plan that helps them get there.
You know, as you're talking, I start thinking about that area of an organization, which to me, when I say contact center, when I think contact center, it's gotten to the point to where there's a contact center in just about every organization of any size, whether it's 2 people, 200, 2,000. I mean, we have to be able to support customers in so many different ways. And the importance of that role, just with really in the past 5 years, has just exploded. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, for sure. That role is your primary contact with clients, your primary contact for acquisition. It's your front-facing company role, organization, and it somehow, for some reason, is the most ignored.
Yeah, and talking about that ignored piece is, that's one reason why I chose to start the academy at Call Center Coach, is to develop that frontline leader. Because even when you start, referring to needing to lead that front line, oftentimes what happens is people just take somebody who's a good individual contributor and put them in charge of or responsible for the development of those people that they were once a peer of. And that transition requires, from a leading perspective, a whole different set of competencies that you just don't develop when you're an individual contributor. And you guys help to accelerate really the overall performance by leveraging some of those leadership skills. Is that correct?
100%. I mean, what we want is for frontline leaders to focus on developing their employees. But in many cases, in a lot of companies, those frontline leaders have to sit at their desk, do a lot of administrative work, look at a lot of reporting, do a lot of things that are not really focused on the development side of their job, which should be their primary focus. So our goal is to, one, reduce all that other stuff they have to do so they can focus on the development, and two, help them become better developers, help their managers understand their development skills and needs. So we're focused on developing them based on the data that we have.
So, I mean, for me, there's a big separation. I think oftentimes people get it confused because when I talk about leadership, for example, people start saying things like, "Oh, yeah, well, we give them lean training." I'm like, that's not leadership. That is management. Yeah. And so people have a tough time separating the two, is meaning that I have to manage the front line and everything that we have to do, but then I have to lead as well. So they're really two different functions.
Yeah, 100%. No, leading has a lot more detail. I mean, management is necessary to understand what you need to do, but leadership is necessary to motivate and develop your people. How you talk to them, how do you motivate them, the skills transfer capabilities that you have, all that is part of leadership.
So if you start looking at most organizations that you're getting the opportunity to work with, and you think about the whole leadership, maturity level and leadership skill level, I mean, how do you find that as an enabler or a disabler?
Well, it's definitely something that needs to be an enabler, but I would say probably in most contact centers, it is probably in a scale of 1 to 10, most contact centers are probably sitting at a 2 or a 3. Now, like you said, agents have been promoted, whether their second level management is really focused on developing them or they just get thrown into a fire drill and they have to learn on the job. In many cases, most of these agents are learning on the job. There's probably not a preparatory process to prepare them to become leaders. They get thrown in and they get to learn how to do things. And our goal is, even in that environment, we know that environment is going to be there. So how do we allow these people to be successful in that environment? How do we give them the tools and capabilities, knowing the environment they're in? Changing that environment is a totally different process. That requires career pathing and HR and a lot of other capabilities in the back end. We're trying to figure out how to make people that get thrown into that environment successful.
Well, and one of the things too is that, I mean, with AmplifAI, needless to say, you have AI in the name of the company, and AI is in your product. But in today's world, a lot of times AI is often met with a whole lot of apprehension and fear because people are thinking that, well, it puts my career and my future and my job at risk when you start throwing in AI, especially in the contact center space. But that's not how you're using it, is it?
No, I mean, I think a lot of those fears, in many cases are probably also overblown. Computers and technology have been automating people's jobs for 20 years, and it's not going to stop. It's been happening forever. IVRs have come into place, CRMs and applications to automate processes. So that's been going on for 20 years. So I think it's just a continuing trend that's not going to stop, and it's nothing new. AI isn't making it dramatically different or increasing that trend at all. It just continues in its current process. What we're trying to do is use this new technology, really, which is better at understanding data, to better understand people's individual skill sets. What are you good at? What are you not good at? How does that compare to high performers? To really start laying out automatically a skill transfer path or skill development path for each employee, so that the managers don't have to sit at their desk. They can focus on doing the skill development and not sit at their desk trying to figure out what should they be doing for everybody.
It's really interesting. I mean, and also I have to go back and comment on something you said about the automation of our jobs, and that somebody tried to put the hysteria that's oftentimes in place in perspective and said, hey, the cotton gin took people's jobs. We didn't have to pick the seed out of the cotton anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Now we can focus on making more shirts.
Yeah, I do think, though, from an individual development perspective, and maybe that's part of where the gap is concerned, is that if I don't feel like I have the opportunity to be developed, or it's not available to me, that's one thing. But then also it requires the individual to say, hey, I have ownership in this. I have to do, what I need to do in order to better myself. And so, going back to that, thinking about organizations and operations that we work with, and when we look at the onboarding and the hiring process and all of that, I mean, are organizations doing a good job of identifying people who want to do better at what they're doing?
Well, I think, and no matter what, in your hiring process, you're always going to have people that want to do better, and you're going to end up with some people that don't want to do better. So I think that's just a given. You'll never be able to get it 100% correct, 100% right. I think the goal, though, is to identify those people that want to do better and give them the ability to get better versus having them be demotivated because they don't see a path forward for themselves. As well as creating a plan and some methodical process to identify the people that don't want to get better. So if you're consistently giving micro-learnings and coaching to everybody, really understanding who's progressing and who's not, why are they not progressing, and identifying the people that have a will issue versus fixing the skill issues become the key. And with Amplify, we kind of help fill that gap. We help give consistent recommendations to managers to focus specifically on a personalized basis with each agent. And then the system is going to track those agents' performance and is going to tell the manager, are these people getting better or not getting better? And that way kind of identifies those issues and creates a workflow and creates a plan for you so you don't have to do it on your own.
So when I started thinking about performance development, going back to my operations days in contact centers, and I used to see some of the behaviors from a supervisor and team lead perspective, is that a lot of times, doing one-on-ones and doing coaching, there are some operations that I was in where we were responsible as frontline supervisors to do some quality work. We had to score and grade calls, and we also had a quality team, and we would look against the variance and scoring of those and things like that. But I often find that what would happen is we had a certain requirement of one-on-one sessions and recordings and evaluations that we had to do, and it would always get clumped at the last of the month, and we would have to pound them out in order to get them done. And the whole aspect of developing people kind of fell to the wayside because we were so busy just doing the day-to-day. How do you help fix that problem?
Well, if you look at it from an Amplify perspective, what we do is on a daily basis, we create a game plan for every frontline leader. So in today's game plan, here's the people that need help in specific areas. Here's the people you coached last week that haven't gotten better, so you should follow up with them. Here's the group of people that you coached last week and they have gotten better, so you should go recognize them. So it kind of creates that positive reinforcement as well as a follow-up of previous coaching sessions as well as new coaching sessions and a plan for everybody. So you don't have to sit, because humans are not good at organizing things and using data to create a plan. Because if you give a bunch of reports to 10 different people, everybody will read those reports and do 10 different things because they understand them differently. So our goal is to take that randomness of action out of the contact center. There's no reason for there to be so much randomness in what needs to be done. If you really look at it, it's a process, and it shouldn't be so complicated for team managers. They should just know exactly what needs to be done, who they should follow up with, who they should recognize, who they should touch base with and do skills transfers with. So this daily action plan of what they should be focused on is something Amplify gives them.
As you were talking, I started also interpreting potential pain, because as humans, we get into habits. I mean, it's like, hey, what do you mean? I've always done it this way. And you want me to do this, which is a radical adjustment? What is that transition or onboarding process for the people who are responsible for that performance management? I mean, how does that happen?
Well, humans by default are scared of change because once they get used to doing something, change becomes difficult. Primarily because now your brain has to think about what it's doing, whereas before it was kind of in a mode of, no, I don't know if you guys have heard of the term cognitive ease. When you don't have to think of something, you just kind of base it on habit. Your brain has an easier time doing it, and it just continues that path, down that path. Change requires you to get out of existing habits and create new habits, which requires a lot of effort from a brain's perspective to make it happen. And it usually won't happen unless leadership requires you to do it. Which is why change management is important, and nothing happens unless it's getting inspected by your leaders. So site leaders and second level leaders in contact centers have to be bought into this process of, we're going to improve how our frontline leaders and agents work, and we're going to drive these actions until they become appropriate behaviors for them, and using the recommendations Amplify is providing, because a tool is only as good as the people and process that use it. Technology is not going to solve your problems unless you're going to adapt its use, drive process, and drive people to actually use it and drive adoption. I can give you any system you want, unless you're actually going to use what it's asked you to do, it's not going to make a difference.
I think that's a really good point. So I also started thinking about how different cultures, you can have different outcomes as well. And a lot of companies will say, well, we decide by numbers. We're all numbers driven. Well, there's a certain backlash that's associated if you actually are executing in that way, and that is the whole dehumanization component. And so if I'm putting in a particular solution where I'm saying that, hey, we're going to become more efficient and more effective, that could be perceived in a different way versus an organization that doesn't have that type of culture. So when you start looking at ideal success, all right, so I'm looking at, company A, company B, company C, different types of cultures and personalities. What do you say, what type of organization typically sees the best gain and impact? What do they look like?
I think organizations that truly want a culture of an employee experience that drives employees to be better, which they believe then ultimately drives a better customer experience, are the best adopted for this. If you're focused on customer experience today, you have to live in a world where that translates into an employee experience. Because if your employees have a good experience, they build skills, they build capabilities, they're going to deliver a better customer experience. If they're numbers driven and commodity driven, they're going to be focused on productivity metrics, they're going to be focused on those types of things. And they're not going to be focused on the soft skills and the relationship skills, because how your managers talk to your agents, how your managers develop agents, in many ways is going to be how your agents talk to your customers. So if you don't have that internal ability to develop and manage and drive a better employee experience, it's really hard to translate agents into delivering a good customer experience.
So I'm trying to get an understanding, and I'm starting to think about, time to impact, because I think a lot of companies, when they put in solutions, they're like, okay, when am I going to get my return? How long is it going to take? And then you start getting the whole sustainability piece. And look, the fact is, I've been in the industry for a long time, and being in operations, I hear some of these, things that are essentially promised, and I'm like, hey, yeah, right. I don't believe that hogwash. So give us a sense of reality as far as transformation, change, being able to enable, implement tools. I mean, this could be a significant undertaking. So tell me how that looks.
I mean, anything that requires you to do something, you have to start off by making it simple. If you make things too complicated, people won't use it. So you're not going to go in here and change your entire environment day one. So typically in our implementations with Amplify, the first step is just making it easier for managers and agents to see their data and take specific coaching actions, irregardless of whether those actions are driving the performance we want, don't want the performance we want, which behaviors, are they selecting the appropriate behaviors. Those will all come secondary. So first, we just want them to use to doing a quantity of activity. Are they doing the coaching sessions they should have? Now, once you can drive quantity, then Amplify kind of helps you then focus on, is the quality of my coaching good or not? Now, if you're only going to do one coaching a week and 4 coachings a month, the quality of those 4 coachings, to be honest with you, is immaterial, because you're just not touching your agents enough. So first step in any implementation is driving the human interaction and get people off their desks, frontline leaders off their desks, just using Amplify for all their data needs and activity needs, and drive some quantity. And what you find is managers and agents actually start liking doing that job better. So now when they start doing more interactions, they're just having more discussions, they're having more quantity of activity, Then all the other tools that Amplify has can be brought in a few months later to say, okay, now let's focus on the quality. We have consistent repetition of quantities of coachings going on. Now let's focus on individual team leaders. Who's good at coaching in what areas? Who's good at not coaching in what areas? What behaviors does somebody need help in? So all these details of exactly understanding your frontline leaders, their skill sets, what they're good at, and developing their coaching skills, all of that comes into place kind of on a secondary basis post initial implementation. And even during the implementation, you can kind of focus in a couple of different areas. Some of our clients will focus on the onboarding process first. So new hire agents that have just gotten off the floor in their nesting process, how do we get them onboarded and up to scale faster versus existing agents in production? So Amplify works in both scenarios. We work with clients to be able to drive and onboard agents faster and better, as well as take an existing production environment and improve performance and skills within there. So that's also an area that we can kind of break things down and start in a very specific place before we move everywhere across the organization.
Well, as you're sitting here and you're talking at this front line, I won't say micro level, I start wondering. I'm like, okay, here's a guy, who was part of the whole, the Telecom Act and was in networks and did telecom, then moved on and took advantage of some opportunities that existed with broadband, then moved over to voice over IP. And then, but how in the heck did you get focused on the front line?
Well, I think that's from my experience at PRC. I'm being kind of an engineering mindset. My view is I easily identify problems that are consistent across large organizations, and then the goal is there a solution? And to be honest with you, until about 7 or 8 years ago, Amplify couldn't exist. All the new capabilities that have been available from a technology perspective in the cloud, with the Amazon cloud and the Microsoft clouds and their APIs and their AI capabilities and everything else that they provide, allows Amplify to be a solution today. Whereas when I was running a BPO 10 years ago, I couldn't have done this because those technologies just were not available. Now having that technology available lets us create a solution for this problem that everybody knows exists. You talk to anybody that runs a contact center and you ask them, is this a problem? Every single person that you talk to says this is a problem. Right? Everybody has this problem of frontline leadership, of consistent agent development, of how do you drive that in a consistent manner. And the only way to do it is to use the data that you're already generating to figure these solutions out. And that's what Amplify helps companies with.
Well, but as you're talking, though, I'm sitting here and also thinking from some people's perspective, they're like, hey, my turnover rate is 50%. Why would I invest that much effort and activity in these people when they're only going to be here for another 6, 8 months, 12 months? Why would I do that?
Well, I think that, to be honest with you, that's from our experience in working with clients, is we've seen where we've been able to identify team leaders' skill gaps such that you can easily identify team leaders that are going to drive 4 to 5 more attrition on their teams versus team leaders that aren't. Because the number one reason for attrition is agents don't get the support they need to become successful. They become demotivated. They start doing the minimum possible. Their performance starts going down. I don't think anybody gets hired to do a job and comes into training their first day and go into production to do a bad job. Nobody's sitting there their first day thinking, I'm just going to come here, I'm going to do training, I'm just going to go do a bad job. I think that becomes an environment they end up living in. Our goal is to get rid of that environment. We don't want people who are motivated coming in the door to 6 months from now leaving because they weren't supported or helped, even though they wanted to. I don't know. There might be a small percentage of people that don't care, but I do believe everybody that comes to work every day wants to do a good job. Nobody comes to work every day to do a bad job.
It's funny that you say that. I always talk about how when we refer to this whole burnout and turnover issue that not just the contact center deals with. I mean, everybody who has frontline employees that they're responsible for deals with is that, you didn't hire them already burnt out. So how did they get that way?
Exactly. 100%.
Okay. So when we're starting to talk about this, though, I mean, this isn't easy stuff. I mean, it just isn't. So, I mean, there's a whole lot of, talking about motivation, inspiration, all of those things that have to happen in order for you to go through this transformation process. One of the things that inspires us on the show is quotes. So we love hearing quotes from our guests and some of their favorites. Is there one or two that you can share that you like?
I mean, I think I just quoted one of my most important quotes is, I think people just don't want to come to work to do a bad job. And it is our job as leaders to figure out, I think some of this also is stuff that comes from the book Good to Great. How do you really go from good to great? You go from good to great by focusing on the details and focusing on the people. Focusing on the numbers doesn't make you go from good to great, because ultimately people drive the numbers. If you focus on people, if you improve the people, you drive that employee frontline development, that's what takes you from good to great. Focusing on numbers doesn't change behavior, which doesn't actually focus on changing numbers.
Yeah, I think focusing on numbers gives you some short-term, potential impacts that could be positive, but long-term, they could be very negative.
100%. I mean, the numbers are the output. I'm not saying you shouldn't focus on numbers. The numbers are the output of the inputs, which are how are we doing with our people actually doing their jobs. If the people do their jobs better, the numbers will automatically get better. You can always make short-term adjustments by making numbers better by just cutting your bottom 20% of your agents, right? That by default makes your numbers better, but now you have created a different problem for the business. So focusing on numbers and short-term gains may get you the short-term gains, but is not a consistent process that you can scale with.
That's for certain. Okay, so when we're talking about you getting to the point to where we are, and I talked about that transition going from networks to now going to focusing on the front line, is I'm sure there were a lot of humps that you had to get over that really taught you some very valuable lessons. Is there a particular story that you can share with us?
Sure. So in my experience, one of my primary learnings in the contact centers was when I was actually in, and I learned almost everything I need to know about contact centers from being in the sites. Listening to the site directors, understanding their day-to-day work, really being in the sites and like seeing the amount of effort they have to go through to do the work that they need to do. So I was in, let's say, one of my sites in North Carolina back in the mid-2000s. We had a client that was extremely customer experience oriented. Very hard on making sure we're driving the right customer experience, obviously being very dedicated to their customers to make sure we were doing the right things for them. And what I found was I had team leaders and frontline leaders and site directors that were very wanting to do a good job. They were very motivated to do a good job, but they did not have the tools to do a good job. So leaving that experience and coming back, what my thought process is how can I enable this group of people that is very motivated, that wants to do a good job, but just does not have the tools to be able to get there. You can always throw people at it, right? It's not like Amplify. If you wanted to do what Amplify does manually, you could throw layers of quality people, you could throw layers of reporting people, you could do layers of lots of people that can do some of this activity. But the problem is in most organizations, you don't have the ability to throw those people at it. So ultimately, I think in the many cases, what I found was giving these people access to tools, giving these people access to stuff, helped enable them at all levels to do their jobs better.
When I start looking at the things that you're focusing in on, and I know, talking about growing the business and being able to impact more of these organizations with, higher performing front lines, when you start looking at one of your goals that you have, what would it be?
Well, one of our goals is really focused on two things. Really, it's the frontline leader, but kind of two focuses for a frontline leader. So it is, how do we make the frontline leader more effective by having them spend more time with their agents and less at their desk? But two, how do we also identify the skill gaps? Because I think one other issue that most contact centers have that most people don't think of is they think their frontline leaders who are responsible for doing 80 to 90% of the skill development and coaching of their agents are experts at everything. So they should be able to do that skills transfer. Well, if they aren't experts at it, and there's the complexity of the contact centers nowadays is much greater, because with automation and self-service and apps and everything like that going on in the world, the easy stuff is the stuff that gets automated. That means the contact center continues to get the harder work. The agents continue to get the more complex calls. That means the managers have to be able to, and in the world of universal agent, omni-channel environment, phone, email, chat, being able to do everything. How do we expect these frontline leaders to be able to be experts at everything? So how do we give them the tools to be able to do skills transfers without them being experts at everything?
And the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. An Even Better Place to Work is an easy-to-use solution that gives you a continuous diagnostic on employee engagement along with integrated activities that will improve employee engagement and leadership skills in everyone. Using this award-winning solution is guaranteed to create motivated, productive, and loyal employees who have great work relationships with their colleagues and your customers. To learn more about An Even Better Place to Work, visit beyondmorale.com/better. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, it's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Sean, the Hump Day Hoedown is a part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Sean, sir, are you ready to hoe down?
I am ready to hoe down.
All right. So what do you think is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
For me, I believe my challenge is also kind of being too much in the details. At the level that I'm at, being able to delegate more, being able to hand things off more. That's a challenge for any person at any leadership level, and that's a challenge everybody has to address. But not micromanaging, delegating, and then focusing on building skills instead of numbers is probably one of the challenges every leader has.
So what is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
I think the best leadership advice I've ever received, and this may be sort of counterintuitive to what we just talked about, would be to make sure once I understand what a person's skill set is or isn't, if I believe they're in the right job or not, I need to take action as fast as possible to help them be successful. If you have a person that fails, it's probably more your fault than their fault. It's your job to either develop them or move them into a place where they can be successful. So failure is typically the manager's responsibilities. Anybody under them is typically their responsibility.
So what do you feel is one of your secrets that helps you lead in business or life?
I think one of my secrets in business and life is that I have the ability to associate and understand and talk to every level of an organization. I can sit with agents and team managers and have discussions about their problems, and I can sit with CEOs of Fortune 500 companies and talk about their issues, and I can go out and raise money from venture capital guys and have discussions with them that are relevant. So being able to kind of work across all the levels and understand people, engage with people, build rapport with people at all the different levels is one of my skills.
And what would be one book that you recommend to our Legion? It could be from any genre.
Well, I think the book we just discussed earlier, Good to Great, has got a lot of tools for leadership, a lot of tools of sort of figuring out how to move away from average and really focus on getting significantly better. I would recommend that book to everybody.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net/Sean Minter. Okay, Sean, this is my last Hump Day Hoedown question. Imagine you've been given the opportunity to take all the skills and knowledge that you have back with you and go back to the age of 25 and make some changes. But you know what? You can't take everything. You can only choose one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
I think the skill or knowledge I would take back with me would be to focus on always be improving and never just being happy with where you are in the job you're in. No matter what you're doing, even if you're a high performer, I think the humans just have the innate view of sort of being happy with being in a situation they're in instead of always be looking at improving. And I think that I've learned that over the years, but I wish I'd learned that when I was significantly younger. Because when you're younger, your ability to impact your future is much greater than when you get older.
Sean, it was an honor to spend time with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
Sure. I mean, the best way to connect with me would be on Twitter at Sean Minter, sminter@amplify.com, or just amplify.com, and you can get to me that way also.
Sean Minter, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. The Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.